Hello everyone, Vovashkonda here, and today in the book club we're gonna talk about one of the books which are speculating on the history, and it's called The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. Basically, I've heard about that book for quite a while. And I think one of the main reasons why I did, it seems to me that it just could be quite a cultural reference. I think for some reason I recall seeing it somewhere in an advertisement that it's gonna be actually some TV series, but somewhere in my mind, it was in my mind before I read it, and I felt like, okay, it seems to me like one of those books which are usually, being recommended to read, and this is like one of the modern classics about what the life could have been if and it's one of the modern classics about what the life could have been if not allies but Nazi Germany, Japan, Italy would have won the Second World War. And Philip K. Dick definitely goes quite an interesting way about it. Basically, the predicament doesn't really sound as if, and we are usually being educated at schools that, of course, one of the main ideas and ideologies of Nazi Germany was that they wanted to eradicate most of the other nations and to clean the whole European race, and basically there should be only Aryan race, and of course the Western Europe also somewhere there on the middle level, but they are all like Slavic people, all the black people, gypsies, Jews, everything needs to be either eradicated or they will all need to become slaves. Additionally, they of course sterilize those whom they decided to leave for slavery for the moment, but I think this kind of perverted ideology led to one of the biggest tragedies in our world history. And of course, Japan had their own reasons, and it was quite funny that Germany, with their cleanliness of the race, became allies with Japan, because clearly they're of different race things, but I think, that's pretty much what makes the whole story weird, and I guess makes the whole story works, because as you all know, Germany back in the days, they were all like the Third Reich, the Nazi Germany, they were all making these secret agreements with everyone. They were really thinking through the whole process of how they will take over the whole world, and when they saw that Entente was entirely passive about how the whole Germany plan was going through. And after the agreement was signed with the USSR, and they divided some of the territories as, these huge countries who don't really care about what Poland or Finland or any or Czech Republic would think, right? Yeah, no one cares. You're too small. No one listens to you, you're a piece of crap. That's the thinking those two beautiful countries had back in the days, or their brave leaders, let's put it this way. At the end of the day, so Philip K. Dick assumed what would happen if we would have lost. The whole story of the book is happening in United States in 15 years after the war has ended, and the whole story revolves mainly in Western states, which are under the Japan, and in this kind of buffer zone, neutral zone, where all the middle states, the central states of United States are. And it seems a bit funny. It's as if Philip K. Dick also decided to make a bit fun of those guys, as usually in the United States there is main focus usually goes either on the West, where California, Washington, and Oregon, and of course the East, where New York, Washington D.C., and all the other things are situated, located, Boston as well, of course. So the East was under the Nazi Germany, West was under this, and of course the least influential states remained as neutral United States of America. The whole plot revolves around few characters. One of them is Robert Childan, who is the owner of the Americana artifacts shop. So he basically sells a lot of old things as souvenirs, and some of the collectors are also buying. And it was a bit funny when they were still talking about the comic books. I think maybe at the time when Philip K. Dick was writing that, it wasn't as crazy as it is now. I think it's not a weird thing to start collecting comic books, and some people actually paying a lot of money to buy those during the auctions or something like this, right? Or those Mickey Mouse watch or some others, and it was like, oh yeah, it was the relics of American culture, and for some reason they were of course making fun a bit of the Japanese, who were trying to integrate in American society and took a lot of American culture, especially in the place where they were now ruling. So Robert Childan was one of those connoisseurs of American culture, and he was still trying to mediate and provide the new Japanese elite with his exquisite historical things. So his own tragic story, and he basically has his own goal of, he seems to be completely lonely, his business is not really running well, and until one day, for some reason, he kind of, it was a bit weird. He sort of fell in love, but he really found attractive a young Japanese woman who went there with her husband to buy some things, and the Japanese were, this couple were so charmed by him, so they also invited him to visit them. And once he even went for the dinner there, and for some reason he had this idea to send that young Japanese woman a present. So let's stop it for now then. Then there was another main character, which is a Frink, or as it turned out to be, his real surname was Fink. Basically, he was a German Jew who left during the Second World War to United States. He, one of the only ways for Jews to still stay secret was to, pretty much change their identity. They needed to change their looks, and Frank also made an operation on his nose in order for him not to seem like a Jew straight away. So he did some surgery, some kind of a surgery, in order for him to look a bit different. And he added one letter to his surname, so it also doesn't sound Jewish anymore. So he basically working in some kind of a factory where they are forging those artifacts that Robert Childan is selling. But no one could actually first see that it actually was a mistake. Not even Robert Childan, who's been in the business for a lot of years. So Frank Frink, together with his other friend, tried to blackmail the owner of this forgery, and they decided to start their own business where they will just make a contemporary artifacts of American culture. And of course, besides that, Frank is really experiencing a time, not the best time of his life, because he's going for the breakup with his wife, Juliana Frink, of whom he's constantly dreaming of, and what she would say and what she would think. And it's still a bit unclear, was at least remained clear to me, why did they break up, but basically they separated, and it didn't seem like she has really hard feelings for him. He still feels quite romantic towards her, so that was a bit weird in the first place. But of course, I think the whole circumstances, they needed to basically live apart from each other. So Juliana was also one of the characters in the book, and she was exactly the person living in those middle states. not so far from Denver. And yeah, so the book is also, of course, introducing her, and she's the judo coach. And one day she's meeting young Italian truck driver whose name was Joe. She found him quite magnetic and interesting, so she even went all in, invited him to her place, and they spent some days together. And then at some point, she was trying to still understand him. It was kind of weird. She, felt sort of in love with the guy. And then at one day, he also first was acting really cold and weird. And then he started to also show his affection towards her. And it all ended up with him offering her to go to Denver to buy new clothes and do all this fun stuff. And all the other cool things. And so they first also discussed this book, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, by Hawthorne Abinson. And as a matter of fact, they were talking about it when they were already on the way to Denver, and it turned out that Joe really wanted to pay a visit to the author of the book. And basically, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy is the book banned in Nazi Germany, because that book, what an irony, contemplates what the world could have looked like if Entente, so United States, Great Britain and USSR would have won the war. And it was a bit funny because Joe, being Italian, remember that? Saying, oh, how come this guy is saying that Italy would betray Germany and Japan and would start fighting against them? What are the odds of this happening? This is impossible, and this is a straight up insult for all the Italians. We are not snakes, which was funny because pretty much that's what happened in the Second World War, right? That was quite a funny moment, I would say. So they know about this book, and then they were basically having their full story based on discovering who wrote the book. While Robert Childan, he of course needed to provide a gift to Mr. Tagomi, who is a big influential trader from Japan, and who is meeting a friend, Mr. Baines, a Swedish guy who there was something unclear about him. At least he is saying that he's Swedish. But then there were some moments when it turned out to be that he is a German counter-intelligence agent. So he was a counter spy. Sort of, yeah. Anyhow. And as a matter of fact, he is going to meet with the high Japanese general, who is also disguised himself as someone else. So they're all meeting at this Mr. Tagami office, and Robert Childan needed to provide a gift for those, because Japanese people, they were all about gifts. And that was so funny to also see how that is happening. And so besides that, at the same time, German Reich is at the brink of new political debacle, because Bormann, who was in charge at that point of a time, unexpectedly died, and first they were all deciding who's going to be the next head, the next Kaiser, next Führer, I think, so people were betting on different odds, and then Goebbels won, and he started to lead, and Mr. Baines, who turned out to be Mr. Weininger, I think, being a counter-intelligence agent, needed to go to Japan to say that Goebbels is planning to start Operation Dandelion, which is basically Germany plans to drop atomic bombs on Japan in order to be the full hegemon in the whole planet Earth. Wow. no one would have expected that from Third Reich, right? Frink at the same time, so they indeed started business with a friend. They were making those small souvenirs, more contemporary ones, and then they also offered them to Childan. He would try to sell those, but Frink with his friends would only get paid only in the case if someone would buy those small things. So he went to Mr. Tagami, who at that point of time they already had a meeting with Japanese general, Mr. Baines, aka German double agent, and Sicherheitsdienst agents who wanted to kill Mr. Baines, aka double agent, so he wouldn't share the intelligence. And Mr. Tagami shot them with the revolver or the pistol that he bought back in the days from Robert Childan. So he killed those officers, and there was like already a scandal, quite a scandalous move that Germany tried to make such a bold move, and went already openly starting the political debacle with this. So he spoke with the diplomat of Germany and expressed his dissatisfaction with what was happening. So there was already at the brink of there was no warm feelings left. And Mr. Tagami really felt bad after killing people, and he already had some health issues as well. So he felt like it was the right thing to do to return the pistol. And at the same time, Childan visited him, offered his contemporary things, and of course he also had his own revelations, and it was a bit funny because Childan seemed to be really out of loop of what has been happening around from all the other things. So he was still offering those small souvenirs to Mr. Tagami. He first didn't want to take them, then he decided to take them, so he used them in order to become calmer, which at the end sort of helped. But that story was didn't change, didn't really end in any interesting way. So I think the only story that mattered in the end was Juliana's story, in the sense of the ending was really interesting. So she at first seemed to be like, she was quite an anti-Nazi, and she seemed like Joe was also not really happy about his position now. And then at first she started to slowly understand who this man really is. So they went to Denver, and she bought all the beautiful dresses, and the guy started to be much more imperative in the sense what she needs to do and what she needs to become. So he was really pushing her hard in order to reach out to Hawthorne Abbenson, the author of Grasshopper Lies Heavy, this banned book from Nazi Germany. She really was confused by why he was so pushing about it, but then the Joe, who had really dark hair, he went to the barber, and after this she saw that he cut his hair short and he's actually blonde, and she realized that all this time he has been lying that he is an Italian war veteran, but rather he is a German assassin who was sent to kill the man in the High Castle, Mr. Abbenson. And why he was called the man in the High Castle? Just because by all the rumors it was said that he was living in the well-protected castle, and that is why nobody was presumably able to reach him and kill him. So Juliana, at first he was kind of scared, but then she didn't know what to do. She didn't really want to go, but Joe or fake Joe was really pushing about it. So it all ended up with her cutting his throat with the razor blade, and then she left and decided to meet Hawthorne Abbenson herself in order to warn him that there are German assassins are going after him. So she managed to call to the Abbensons, And his wife picked up, and she said, yeah, sure, but maybe he's gonna be busy, so don't really count on him actually talking to you. But when Juliana actually went all the way to the address, she realized that for some reason there is no castle. And the Hawthorne Robinsons was seemingly quite cheerful and quite... yeah, there wasn't anything that was really worrying him. He seemed to be quite lighthearted when she met him. So they were still having quite a small conversation about how he wrote the book, what actually happened, what is all. And throughout the whole book they were using I Ching, which is Chinese invention, basically like an oracle, and usually what people would ask a question and then there would be certain manipulations going on and they would find the answer of what the destiny is telling them what is actually going to do. So as it turned out to be, she was really pushing about like what is happening, and then the oracle told her to go meet him, and her main question was whether he used oracle to write his book. And at first he was a bit defensive, but then he admitted that yes, the whole book was written by the oracle, and the open ending basically says, so does it mean that Japan and Germany lost the war? And the conclusion was yes. So the idea was that, of course, that there will be another book about all of this, and Philip K. Dick really went deep, as he admitted, in terms of description of all this terrible experiments the German doing and all the terrible slaughtering and butchering that they were doing against all the other nations, which to me, I mean, I understand, but it seems to me like he is a bit exaggerating because not much of that was really described in the book, so I'm not sure how deep he actually went down into this. I would still have quite some questions. Like, he did have add some color to what has been happening, and I understand that. I think what makes this book classics, not the execution itself, but the idea, and just that he was talented enough to speculate on what could have been. But then the conclusion was sort of that both Japan and Germany lost the war, which I kinda try to interpret it myself, that for example Japan and Japanese people who were now living in the US, they really adopted a lot of American culture, so thus they kinda losing their own, and American culture won over their own culture. But with German Nazis, I didn't really see. So I mean, I would understand that basically, even though they win the war, they lost control of the things, and after Bormann's death, there were just different political games going on, and it seemed to Philip K. Dick probably that it would have been like a house of cards that was so unstable in terms of the political climate at the Germany, if that would all have happened, that there was Goebbels and there was another Heinrich, I think, the guy who was like also one of the elite leaders of German Nazis at that point of the time, who was opposing Goebbels and his politics. And I suppose that's kind of the conclusion that we can derive from this open ending. And I get it. This book, I think for their own time, that topic was probably a bit more tabooistic than it is now, as it definitely he wrote this book way earlier than what I'm talking now, 2020, where all these wounds were still kind of open. And I think for a lot of people this whole topic was much more unpleasant to cover, and especially in the way where you would sort of put certain level of disrespect to the actual win and trying to see what actually would happen. But this is not new. I'm not sure if he was there exactly the first person to try to think what would have happened if Germany and Japan would have won. But yeah, at least this concept doesn't sound to me like fresh. But I think we're living in the age when there is so much content around. So of course. Nothing feels as fresh as it once was, except for all the Christopher Nolan film fans. They, for some reason, consider all of that to be extremely contemporary and new, but that's the other topic. So yeah, if I would rate this book from 0 to 10, I would give it 5 or 6. Like, it's written okay. It's does it worth your time really to explore how he imagined the whole world building? I don't know. Like, it doesn't really leave you with a lot of ideas that you wanted to speculate around. I think really just the whole concept of like what would have happened if Germany would have won and Japan. For some reason, keep on forgetting on Japan. Maybe for European, German Nazi were much bigger problem than the Japanese army. It's quite interesting that they try to tie into all the different operations and he seemingly done the research in order to write the book. The book itself is quite short for something that he's saying that he really deeped so much into all of the culture those Nazis were having. I mean, again, I think I'm speaking from the perspective from the person who's now living in the modern age. So for me, 70 years after the whole war happening, it's really hard to feel the pain that people felt when, even, 30 years after the war. Maybe his family was going through this. I think, of course, almost the whole world was touched by this, of course. And maybe he personally was still a child when this all's been happening, and that's why for him it was such a catastrophe in the life. That is why I can understand him as a person, not necessarily as a creator, as expressing just my personal opinion. So no one, please don't take it personal. But yeah, I do think that the book is a bit weak. Or at least, okay, it doesn't feel weak, it more feels like incomplete. And there more could have been done in terms of to make the whole story more exciting, more interesting in a certain sense. Yeah. I mean, it's not as if like I didn't enjoy reading it. I enjoy reading a lot of things. It was interesting to see how people thought about all of this back in the days. And I think, he wrote this book pretty much in 60s, in the beginning of 60s. So of course it was so fresh, and yeah. Oh my God, my feedback sounds kind of disgraceful, but it's definitely not the goal. Anyhow, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this rather long description of my feelings, my thoughts on the book, The Man in the High Castle. And yeah, I wish you a pleasant week. Subscribe, give a like, and put down in the comments what do you guys think about it.